Cameras are everywhere now, from phones to security systems to dash cams, recording every moment of our lives. But sometimes a camera captures something else entirely, a moment when everything changes and the final seconds before tragedy strikes. 8-year-old's last walk. In March 2009, in a small California town, a security camera mounted outside a family home captured a young girl playing outside and moving through the mobile home park. She was carefree, happy, and it seemed like a normal Friday afternoon. The girl's name was Sandra, and she was 8 years old. She lived with her mother, grandparents, and siblings, and had an outgoing personality. That afternoon, Sandra came home from school at 3 p.m., gave her mother a kiss, and asked permission to play at a friend's house nearby. Her mother said yes because the mobile home park was a place where everyone knew everyone, and kids played outside constantly. Sandra didn't come home for dinner, and at 7:53 p.m., her mother reported her daughter missing. Police arrived quickly and reviewed surveillance footage. The clip showed Sandra at 3:54 p.m. walking toward a neighbor's trailer, and 8 minutes later, the same camera captured an SUV leaving the park. Over the next 10 days, over 300 trained searchers from 17 agencies combed the area. The reward climbed to $26,000, and police received over 1,500 tips. The real perpetrator was hiding in plain sight, attending candlelight vigils for Sandra and approaching FBI agents with helpful tips. On April 6, 2009, farm workers draining an irrigation pond spotted a large black suitcase floating in the water. Police opened it to find Sandra's remains inside. The autopsy revealed she had been sedated with drugs and subjected to unspeakable acts. For 10 days, while thousands searched, Sandra had been lying in that pond the entire time. The suitcase belonged to Melissa Huckabee, a 28-year-old Sunday school teacher who lived in the same mobile home park as Sandra. Her 5-year-old daughter was one of Sandra's playmates, and Sandra had visited Huckabee's trailer the day she disappeared. Huckabee was the granddaughter of Pastor Clifford Lawless, who ran the nearby church where she taught Sunday school. On paper, she was the last person anyone would suspect. Investigators started noticing strange coincidences. The day Sandra vanished, Huckabee sent a text to Sandra's mother saying to tell police that she had something stolen that day. The item was her suitcase. The next day, at a vigil, Huckabee handed police a note she claimed to have found that described exactly where the suitcase was dumped. Surveillance footage told a damning story. At 3:54 p.m., Sandra was captured walking toward Huckabee's trailer, and 8 minutes later, Huckabee's SUV left the park. Cameras later captured Huckabee's vehicle at her grandfather's church, and a retired U.S. Marine and his wife spotted Huckabee at the irrigation pond where she appeared distracted and hurried. FBI agents searched the church and found a rolling pin with a bent handle. DNA testing confirmed the blood belonged to Sandra. Bottles of medication were found in Huckabee's home that matched the drug found in Sandra's system. 2 months before Sandra's passing, police had responded to a report of a missing 7-year-old girl in the same park, and Huckabee returned the child after 4 hours. The girl was hospitalized under the influence of a strong muscle relaxant. On April 10, 2009, Huckabee drove herself to the Tracy police station and underwent nearly 6 hours of questioning. Just before midnight, they arrested her. In exchange for prosecutors dropping capital punishment, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At sentencing, she said, "I still cannot understand why I did what I did. That question is something I will struggle with for the rest of my life." Over 4,500 people attended Sandra's memorial. Today, Sandra is known as Tracy's Angel. The surveillance footage of Sandra skipping with her arms swinging has been viewed millions of times. Those few seconds capture everything pure and innocent about childhood, and then she walks out of frame towards someone she trusted. Suitcase through London. In 2021 in London, England, a Malaysian woman was tragically taken in a case that became the first trial for a life-ending crime conviction in England and Wales to have the sentencing phase televised. What makes this case particularly disturbing is the haunting CCTV footage that captured nearly every phase of the crime, from the moment the killer walked toward the victim's home carrying an empty suitcase, to the moment she struggled to drag it through the streets of London for over 2 hours. The victim was named Myun Chong, originally from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but she had lived in London for 30 years. Friends at church knew her as Deborah. She was a vulnerable widow who suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. A friend from church described her as having a sweet, childlike nature, trusting and naive. The killer was named Gemma Mitchell, born July 22, 1984. She enrolled at King's College London to study human sciences and learned how to surgically take apart human forms. She was awarded the Hamilton Prize for Anatomical Excellence and graduated with first-class honors. She relocated to the UK in 2015 and lived with her mother in a property worth around £4 million. But the house was in shambles after a renovation project went wrong, and she was cheated out of £230,000. Desperate for money, she turned to a friend from church. Mitchell met Chong at church and positioned herself as Deborah's spiritual healer. Chong agreed to give Mitchell £200,000 to help fund house renovations, but then Deborah had a change of heart and withdrew the offer. 3 days before she disappeared, Deborah texted, "Until you've sold the house, I won't want you to come to me at my house because I'm stressed to the core." Just before 6:30 a.m. on June 11th, Mitchell was seen on video walking from her address with a large blue suitcase that was empty, light, and easy to maneuver. She arrived at Deborah's street at 8:01 a.m. The next 5 hours, there was no footage. She emerged at 1:13 p.m., carrying the blue suitcase that was now filled out and difficult to move. She had to kick it with her foot just to get it rolling. She was captured on CCTV dragging the bags through the street for 2 hours before she was picked up by a minicab. She called 9 taxi companies before a driver finally collected her. Later that evening, Mitchell showed up at a hospital with a broken finger. Prosecutors argued the injury likely came from attacking Deborah. Mitchell kept the remains at her home for about 2 weeks. During that time, she made a false report and sent messages saying Deborah had gone to spend time with family. She also forged Deborah's will to ensure the estate would go directly to her using a deceased neighbor's identity. On June 26th, Mitchell rented a Volvo and drove over 200 miles to Salcombe in Devon. She got a flat tire, and the mechanic who changed the wheel described an odd, musty smell inside the vehicle, but he never saw the suitcase. The next day, a family on holiday made a gruesome discovery of incomplete remains. The missing upper portion was discovered 4 days later. Mitchell was arrested on the 6th of July and gave the same answer to every question: no comment. She was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years. The judge told Mitchell, "You have shown absolutely no remorse and appear to be in complete denial about what you did." Gemma Mitchell walked through one of the most surveilled cities on Earth dragging a suitcase containing her fallen friend for over 2 hours. None of them knew what was happening, but the cameras saw everything. Tinder date turns deadly. On December 1st, 2018, 21-year-old Grace Millane was living her best life. Fresh out of university with a marketing degree from Lincoln, she had embarked on the backpacking adventure of her dreams through South America and now New Zealand. She was bombarding her family with photos of every incredible moment, excited and happy about the journey ahead. That evening, she sent her parents a final message with a photo of a Christmas tree outside Auckland's Sky City Casino, a festive scene that captured the holiday spirit of the city. It was the last time they would hear from her because Grace had a date that night with a Tinder match, a guy who claimed to be an oil company manager living in a hotel. A friend texted asking how it was going, and "I click with him so well," Grace replied enthusiastically. That text still haunts everyone who knows this story because here's the thing about this case. You can watch almost every moment of what happened next. Auckland CBD is blanketed with CCTV cameras, and police gathered 6 days of footage and pieced together a minute-by-minute timeline that would reveal the horrifying truth. At 5:40 p.m., Grace left her hostel on Queen Street dressed for a date, wearing a black dress and looking forward to the evening ahead. At the same time, cameras caught a 26-year-old man named Jesse Shane Kempson entering the Bluestone Room pub nearby and ordering a beer. At 5:45 p.m., Grace walked past the Sky Tower and paused at a Christmas display to snap the final photo for her family, a moment frozen in time that would become heartbreaking. At 5:50 p.m., CCTV captured Grace and Kempson meeting for the first time at the base of the Sky Tower. He hugged her warmly and they walked to the casino together, appearing like any other couple starting their date. From here, the footage showed them bar hopping through Auckland's entertainment district, Andy's Burgers in Sky City for cocktails, a Mexican cafe on Victoria Street where they shared 3 jugs of margaritas and sangria, then back to the Bluestone Room. They were talking and laughing and kissing, and by all appearances, everything looked completely normal. These were 2 people on a date that was going well, enjoying each other's company in the nightlife of Auckland. Grace even texted her friend saying she wanted to get smashed with him, indicating she was having a good time and felt comfortable. But Grace didn't know something crucial. She was the 6th woman Kempson had met through Tinder that week, and she wasn't the first he'd hurt. At 9:40 p.m., CCTV captured Grace and Kempson walking arm in arm into the lobby of the City Life Hotel, a budget accommodation in central Auckland where Kempson was staying. They entered the elevator together, chatting and smiling, and Grace was seen following Kempson out onto the 3rd floor where his room was located. This was the last verified footage of Grace Millane alive before she vanished from the world. What happened in that room became the subject of a 3-week trial, international outrage, and a legal defense so controversial it sparked movements to change laws in multiple countries. According to Kempson's version of events, they had intimate relations, and Grace asked him to restrict her breathing during the encounter. He claimed what happened next was a tragic accident, deploying what became known as the infamous rough romance defense. Forensic evidence told a completely different story that contradicted his claims. A pathologist testified that it takes 4 to 5 minutes of sustained pressure to take someone's life through strangulation. Grace would have lost consciousness in about 10 seconds, but to end her life required 4 to 5 minutes of continuous force applied to her neck, even after she went limp and unconscious. As the pathologist put it bluntly, to maintain pressure on the neck sufficient to do that for 4 to 5 minutes takes quite a bit of effort. Effort isn't an accident. Next, effort is a deliberate choice made over and over again for minutes. After Grace passed away in his hotel room, police recovered Kempson's phone and examined the search history, which revealed a timeline of depravity that shocked even seasoned investigators. At 1:29 a.m. on December 2nd, just hours after Grace had died, Kempson began watching adult entertainment videos on multiple websites. At 1:45 a.m., he took 7 explicit photographs of Grace's form as it lay in his room. Grace's mother, Gillian, was in the courtroom when this evidence was read aloud and broke down completely, having to leave the room, while Grace's father, David, sat frozen in his seat, staring directly at Kempson with an expression of pure anguish and rage. At 6 a.m., Kempson's Google searches became even more revealing of his consciousness of guilt. He searched for rigor mortis, then extra-large bags, carpet cleaner, hottest fire, and Waitakere Ranges, which is a forested area outside Auckland where he would eventually bury Grace's body. Later that afternoon, his searches got even more disturbing and showed a calculated mind trying to cover his tracks. Flesh-eating birds, and are there vultures in New Zealand? There aren't any vultures in New Zealand, and this fact suggests he was hoping that nature would do the cleanup work for him and destroy the evidence. The detail that keeps you up at night and truly demonstrates the sociopathic nature of this man is this: at 2:53 p.m. on December 2nd, while Grace's remains lay contorted inside a suitcase in his apartment, Jesse Kempson went on another Tinder date. He met another woman at a bar in Ponsonby, had drinks, laughed, was charming and personable, and she presumably had no idea she was sitting across from a man whose hotel room contained a tragic secret and whose hands had taken a life less than 24 hours earlier. He came back to his hotel room and hired a carpet cleaning machine to clean up any evidence from the apartment. Then, at 9:26 p.m., CCTV captured Kempson wheeling a large suitcase on a trolley through the City Life hotel lobby and out to a rental car he'd hired that morning. The next day, he drove to the Waitakere Ranges, stopped at a hardware store where he bought a shovel while being caught on CCTV again, and buried Grace in a hidden resting place among the trees. Grace's family knew something was terribly wrong when she didn't respond to birthday messages on December 2nd, her 22nd birthday, which should have been a celebration. When days passed with no word, on December 5th, they filed a missing persons report with New Zealand authorities. By that point, police already suspected something deeply sinister had occurred. They had identified Kempson as the last person seen with Grace through the extensive CCTV footage and were tracking his movements frame by frame through Auckland. On December 8th, the investigation officially became a major crime inquiry and Kempson was arrested. When police first interviewed him, he lied repeatedly and claimed that he and Grace had parted ways around 10 p.m. on December 1st and had planned to meet the next day, but she never showed up. When confronted about the suitcase caught on CCTV footage, he changed his story. In a second interview, confronted with mounting evidence that made his lies impossible to maintain, Kempson finally admitted Grace was gone and admitted to burying her body. He insisted it was a tragic accident and led police to the location in the Waitakere Ranges. On December 9th, Grace Millane was found buried in a suitcase, with her body contorted to fit inside, along with her earrings and a small metal tag inscribed with the word freedom, a cruel irony given how her life had ended. New Zealand was absolutely shattered by this tragedy. This wasn't supposed to happen in their country, a nation that consistently ranks as one of the safest travel destinations in the world. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made a personal and tearful public apology to Grace's family, expressing the nation's collective shame and grief. The trial in November 2019 lasted 3 weeks and drew international media attention. Kempson's defense team deployed the rough romance defense, sometimes called the 50 Shades defense, arguing that Grace had requested restricted breathing during consensual activity, and what happened was a tragic accident. The jury of 7 women and 5 men deliberated for just 5 hours before reaching a unanimous guilty verdict, clearly rejecting the defense's narrative. In February 2020, Jesse Shane Kempson was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years, meaning he won't be eligible for release until at least 2037. But the story doesn't end there because the full scope of Kempson's predatory behavior was yet to be revealed. After the primary trial, Kempson faced 2 additional trials for crimes against other women who came forward after recognizing him as Grace's attacker. In October 2020, he was convicted of violating boundaries, threatening to end the life of, and physically harming an ex-girlfriend whom he had financially drained, held a sharp object to her neck, and forced into acts against her will. He was sentenced to 7.5 years. In November 2020, he was convicted of forcing himself upon another British tourist he'd met on Tinder, a crime committed just months before he took Grace's life. He was sentenced to 3.5 years for that offense. When name suppression was finally lifted in December 2020, the full picture emerged for the public to see. Jesse Shane Kempson wasn't just someone who took a life, but a serial predator who had been escalating his violence against women for years, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. Grace's father, David Millane, never recovered from the ordeal of losing his daughter and sitting through the trial. He was diagnosed with cancer shortly after attending the proceedings and died in November 2020, less than 2 years after losing Grace, leaving many to believe the stress and heartbreak had contributed to his illness. Grace's mother, Jillian, found a different way to cope with her unimaginable grief and channeled it into advocacy and helping other women. In Grace's memory, Gillian and her niece Hannah founded Love Grace, a charity that collects handbags, which were Grace's favorite accessory, and fills them with toiletries and essential items for women escaping domestic violence situations. To date, they've distributed over 23,000 bags to women in need across the world, turning tragedy into something that helps others. In January 2024, both women were awarded OBEs by King Charles for their tireless work tackling violence against women and supporting survivors. Gillian also campaigned relentlessly to ban the rough romance defense in the UK, arguing that it allowed perpetrators to blame victims for their own deaths, and she succeeded in helping to change the law in England and Wales, ensuring Grace's legacy would protect other women. Grace Millane was 21 years old and had her whole life ahead of her with dreams of traveling the world, building a career, and making her mark. Instead, she became a catalyst for change in New Zealand and the UK and sparked a global conversation about violence against women, consent, and how we protect young travelers. She should still be here, celebrating life and making memories with her family. But her story continues to save lives and change laws, ensuring that her death was not in vain.